Hello, happy Wednesday. Hope you're doing well, and thank you for joining us joining me on this midweek catch up. And I just want to share something with us today and get us to think about some things very briefly. Not going to keep you long. And towards the end of last week, a good friend of mine, a pastor, just asked me to put together just a little 5-minute devotional for his church, and on the subject of change. And so I did that, and it's really about that I want to talk about today, change, because it's really got me thinking. Change, that 5-letter word, it is 5 letters, right? CHANGE. And because this season is one of the most significant seasons of change that we not just as a church, as a society, are going through such a significant season of change. And oftentimes with change, there's a fight that goes with it. Not all change is easy. Not all change is sweatless. In fact, I'd venture to suggest that the easier the change, the less lasting it will be. But we're seeing change, or the fight for change, everywhere. We're seeing it with regards to racism and all that's going on at the minute. We're seeing change and changes as a result of, with regards to this whole pandemic that we're living through, and this week I'm sure things are going to change again with regards to government advice. We're seeing change with regards to church and who we are and how we function. So all to do with change. We're seeing change. Many of us will have seen change in relationships. People you will have been able to see, people that you won't have been able to see, all to do with change. I'm sure many of us individually have changed over the past quarter of a year since we've been in lockdown. Man, it sounds a long time when you say it like that, doesn't it? But change and the fight that goes with it. Changes to our waistline and our hairline. Hence the hat is all over the place today. But change, everywhere we look, there is change. And change is often uncomfortable, but it is a fact of life. In fact, I look back through my whole life and it's all to do with change. When I used to be a teacher, I used to tear my hair out at this, but curriculums and approaches to teaching would change over periods of time. And oftentimes there'd be so much change that whatever they told you, whatever you did yesterday, metaphorically speaking, and then they said, don't do that anymore, we're implementing new things and this is the way we do it now. You can bet your bottom dollar that if you just hang on just a little bit longer, then what they said we no longer do will appear back into the curriculum, just because everything is always changing. Just a fact of life. Remember when some of you who are like me, a bit more mature of years, maybe when you had kids way back in the day, the wisdom there was certain. You know, when you lay your baby in a cot, you used to lay them tummy down. That was the perceived wisdom, and then society evolves and research happens, and then that wisdom changes, and so we now no longer lay them on their fronts. We lay them by and large on their backs, and there's reasons for that, and who knows what it's going to be in 5 years time. Maybe we'll be putting our babies to sleep on their heads or something. I don't know, but everything changes. For many of us, it's this whole season that we're in, and whether we perceive it or not, church is changing. But if we don't know how to flow with change, we may mistakenly think that church has stopped. Because if all church is, for many of us, is just a meeting, then we're not having meetings like we used to. But for those who perceive and those who understand, the church is as much alive today as it has ever been. But the point is, there's always change in life. And oftentimes as believers, and I can speak for myself as well, we don't really do well in seasons of change. And I was thinking, well, why is that? And I've come to this conclusion. A lot of the time we are focusing on what we know rather than who we know. Let me say that again. A lot of the time, a lot of the reason for struggling to cope with change is because we're so majored on the what rather than the who. what we know rather than who we know. And therefore, as a result, we feel uncertain, we feel challenged, we feel intimidated, we feel uncomfortable. We can sometimes question, well, where is God in all of this? And if we're not careful, our inability to handle and process change will mean that change will always put a ceiling on us. It will always limit us, and it will always confine us. So how do we handle change? I just want to talk about that very briefly. How do we handle change? How should we be? As Peter said, what manner of men ought we to be in the midst of all these things? And Malachi chapter 3 verse 6, and I'll just read it very briefly. Malachi, don't freak out. Malachi is more than a book about tithing. There's some good stuff in Malachi that doesn't talk about tithing. But in Malachi 3 and verse 6, the scripture says this: I am the Lord, and I do not change. I am the Lord, and I do not change. What a great reminder. Things may change, situations may change, life may change, circumstances may change, even our own way we approach things and think about things may change. But God's reminder to us today is this: in an ever-changing world, in an ever-shaking world, He does not change. Church may change, but He does not. Your professional status may have changed over the past however many months, but He does not, because it's not your professional status that defines you. It's not what we know, it's who we know. Your trouser size may have changed, but He does not. He does not. He, with your slim self, with your curvy self, with whatever, He does not change. Social distancing may have changed, but He does not. It's not 2 meters, it's not 1 meter. No, thank God there is one who sticks closer than even the closest of close brothers. He does not change. And when He says He does not change, that doesn't mean that He's, old-fashioned and stuck in His ways, and therefore a lot of people today think he's irrelevant for 21st century living. That's not what He's talking about. It's not saying that He does not change in terms of what He's saying is this: His nature. His nature does not change. His abilities do not change. How He thinks and how He feels towards each and every one of us, they do not change. When even we're doubting and disliking ourselves, He does not change in the way that He thinks and feels about us. Isn't that good news? His love, His kindness, His willingness to be there, His faithfulness, they do not change. His passion and His compassion does not change. His willingness to be there in the midst of a raging, changing life does not change. God does not change. He can be trusted. And that anchors us in times of change because of who we know rather than what we know. I'm reminded of James in James chapter 1. And remember, a couple of weeks ago we played that hymn, Great Is Thy Faithfulness. I believe Pastor Sam Zulu's favourite song, according to Facebook. And it's from this verse really that we get the line about as He has been, He forever will be, great is Thy faithfulness. But James chapter 1 and verse 17 says, every good and perfect thing comes from above. It's from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. We're surrounded by people in life, aren't we, where there's variations. You never know whether you're going to get them in a good mood or a bad mood. They said they'd open a door for you one day, and then the following day the door slams shut in your face. And yet with God, who does not change, there's no variation. What He said yesterday, He says today. How He feels about you yesterday, He feels about you today, and He will feel about you tomorrow. He said, I'll be there yesterday, He'll be there for you today, He will be there for you tomorrow. So we've got to try and get to the place where we stop looking at the situation and from that determining whether God is with us. He said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. Regardless of how you feel, He is there because He does not change. And when it comes to God and who He is, He's rock solid. He's not double-minded. And yes, things may change, but God does not. And in fact, if it's seen, if you can see it, the things that we put all our confidence in, the economy, That's important, but if your confidence is in all of that, that will change. It's cyclical. It goes up, it goes down. Your house prices, they will change. They'll go up, they'll go down. If your confidence is in your skill set, things change, but he does not. If your confidence is in what is only seen, then the Apostle Paul tells us, doesn't he? I think it's in 2 Corinthians where he says, listen, what is seen is temporal. Or in other words, if you can see it, don't hold your breath because it will change. But then he says, what is unseen is eternal. Or in other words, there's a realm, there's a God, there's something out there that's not perceived by natural senses. And that is what never changes. And that is where God is. What is unseen is eternal. So, what am I saying? I'm saying, listen, don't be intimidated by the change going on around us. There's going to be more change. There's going to be more change as a society, as a nation. There's going to be more change with regards to the church at large. And I believe for us as Hope, there's going to be change. But do not be intimidated by it, because in it all, God is in it and he does not change. Oh, when will church start again? We need a good meeting. Church never stopped because we are the church. So we need to open our eyes to those things. Is there going to be a second spike? I don't know. You get your skeptics and and there may well be a second spike, and we're starting to see patterns of that in America and in China, and there may well be, but in it all, God does not change. Who he is, how he feels about us, whatever happens medically, he is still there in the midst of it with us all. Oh, what's the latest with social distancing? He's still there. Oh, my hat's doing all pointy things, but he's still there. He sticks closer than a brother, as we already mentioned. So it's who we know. That's all I wanted to say today. Let's major on who we know rather than what we know, because what we know will let us down, but who we know remains and is eternal. So in the midst of change, don't panic. God is with you in that boat. And if he needs to speak to those storms and say, peace be still, he'll do that. But here's where most of the storms happen in life. They happen within us. So that's my prayer for us today. Rather than majoring on that be still and you be still and that situation be still, my prayer is that you and I can speak to the inside of each and every one of us where God resides by his Spirit. And whatever is competing to try and displace him in terms of all that panic and all that worry and that anxiety, that is the storm that we speak to today. So in your heart, in your very hearts today, because of who he is, we speak to that storm within you and we say, peace, be still. Amen. See you Sunday. Bye.